The cargo ship Vigilant Dawn drifted through the pale mist of the Caesarea Nebula, her hull scarred from years of service. Inside, the crew prepared for another long haul. 37 standard cycles of transporting industrial food rations to the distant colonies. For most of the alien crew, it was routine. For the new human on board, it was a first mission far from home. His name was Evan Brooks. He stood quietly near the galley entrance as the ship's captain, a tall, scaled being named Commander Threx, studied his personnel file. Threx's golden eyes narrowed slightly as his talons tapped against the datapad. "So," the captain said slowly, his voice carrying a low rumble. "Human male, age 32, civilian culinary worker from the Terran Confederation. You requested assignment as a ship cook?" Evan nodded. He was dressed simply, gray uniform, sleeves rolled, a small tool pouch at his belt. His expression was calm but unreadable. "Yes, sir." Threx leaned back. "No combat background? No engineering certification? You've never even served on a freighter before?" Evan scratched the back of his neck. "That's true." "Then tell me, human," Threx said with a faint edge of disbelief. "Why should I let you on my ship?" Evan looked up, his brown eyes steady. "I don't talk much, sir, but I can bake." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The alien officers exchanged confused glances. Baking? On a cargo ship that mostly survived on nutrient paste? Finally, Threx gave a slow, uncertain shrug. "Works for me," he said, waving a clawed hand. "Report to the galley." And just like that, the human was aboard. The galley of the Vigilant Dawn was a forgotten corner of the ship, small, cold, and filled with storage crates. Most of the food came in sealed containers. There was no real kitchen, only a heating unit and a basic preparation table. Evan didn't complain. He unpacked his few tools, a compact oven, a whisk, and a few jars of earth spices. The crew who passed by gave him curious looks. To them, food was fuel, not art. The first few days passed quietly. Evan cooked basic meals, kept to himself, and listened. The aliens were from different worlds. Some insectoid, some reptilian, a few from oxygen-heavy planets. They often ignored him, assuming humans were only suited for hard labor or combat. But Evan didn't mind. He observed how each crew member reacted to taste, smell, and temperature. He noted who avoided certain textures or who preferred warmth in their meals. By the end of the week, he started experimenting. The first test was simple: bread. He mixed the ingredients carefully, measuring by instinct more than formula. The yeast he had brought from Earth was old but alive. The smell of baking bread soon filled the corridor outside the galley, a warm, earthy scent that drifted through the recycled air like a forgotten memory. Lieutenant Core, a four-armed insectoid navigator, was the first to notice. He clicked his mandibles curiously. "What is that smell?" Evan smiled faintly. "Bread. Bread?" Core tilted his head. "Is that a weapon?" Evan chuckled softly. "Not yet." When the timer chimed, he pulled out the golden loaf and sliced it open. Steam rose in the dim light. He offered a piece to Core, who hesitated but finally took a bite. The alien froze, his four eyes widening. "It is warm. It melts," Evan nodded. "That's butter." Core chewed slowly, his wings twitching. "I did not know food could do this." Soon, word spread. Within a few days, nearly half the crew visited the galley out of curiosity. The human made small things: muffins, sweet rolls, biscuits, simple comfort food from a small blue planet. Even the captain stopped by once. "My crew seems to be eating more than they used to," Threx grumbled. "Care to explain?" Evan just smiled. "Maybe they're remembering home." Threx didn't respond. But when he left, he took a small piece of bread with him. On the 12th day of the mission, the ship encountered a crisis. One of the fuel cells overheated near the cargo hold. The explosion was contained, but several decks lost power, including the medbay. The engineers worked fast, but the stress among the crew grew visible. Evan watched silently from the galley as panic spread. Arguments broke out. Tired eyes, shaking hands. Even aliens needed morale, so he did what he knew best. He started baking again. This time he made apple pie, though the apples weren't real, just a clever mix of synthetic fruit paste and spice blends. But the smell was pure earth. It drifted through the ventilation ducts like hope. One by one, the crew followed the scent to the galley. The lights flickered, but the oven glowed steady and warm. Evan stood at the counter, serving slices onto metal plates. Commander Threx arrived too, his usual authority softened by fatigue. "You made food during an emergency?" he asked. Evan shrugged. "People think clearer when they're not hungry." Threx frowned, then took a bite. His eyes widened slightly and his voice rumbled low. "This is unexpectedly good." Evan smiled. "It's not much, sir. Just pie." The captain looked around the galley. The crew eating together, laughing quietly, fear fading for a moment. He realized something he had not expected from this human. "This," Threx said finally, "is discipline disguised as comfort." Evan's lips curved into a small smile. "Back home, we call it kindness." After the crisis passed, the Vigilant Dawn's crew began to change. Work teams cooperated better. Fights stopped. Crew members started trading spices, asking Evan for recipes. The galley became a small place of peace amid the endless dark of space. But not everyone was pleased. One night, an officer named Saren, a tall, cold-eyed alien from the Skari species, confronted Evan. "You are making them weak," Saren hissed. "We are soldiers, not children needing comfort." Evan looked up from kneading dough. "You think care makes people weak?" "It distracts them from duty." Evan shook his head. "No, it reminds them why they have duty." Saren sneered and stormed away. But later, during a tense repair shift, it was Saren who quietly came to the galley asking for something to eat. Evan handed him a small warm biscuit. No words were needed. Weeks passed. The Vigilant Dawn finally neared its destination, a mining outpost orbiting a red dwarf star. By then, every crew member knew the smell of Evan's baking. It was the scent of trust, of something alive in the cold void. One evening, Threx called Evan to the command deck. The captain's tone was calm but serious. "We've received a distress signal," he said. "An outpost on the far side of the star. Minimal survivors. We're diverting to assist." Evan nodded. "Understood." Threx studied him for a moment. "You don't seem afraid." Evan smiled slightly. "I don't talk much, sir, but I know when people need help." Threx gave a low rumble of approval. "Then prepare what you need. We may have wounded when we return." Evan's answer was simple. "I'll be ready." That night, as the Vigilant Dawn turned toward the dying outpost, the crew gathered in the galley one last time before the mission. The ovens glowed, filling the air with the smell of baking bread. The crew shared small jokes, laughter, and quiet songs from different worlds. Evan stood among them, silent but content. He didn't see himself as a hero. He wasn't a soldier or a scientist. But he understood something deeper, that even in the cold reaches of space, a warm meal could hold a crew together. Outside, the nebula shimmered like firelight. Inside, a human baked. The Vigilant Dawn slipped into orbit around the damaged outpost. The red dwarf star glowed dimly in the distance, casting long shadows across the metallic surface of the abandoned colony below. The crew gathered in the control deck, their faces lit by the soft light of the monitors. Commander Threx stood tall, his golden eyes watching the holographic display that showed the colony's outline. Broken structures, weak energy signals, and faint life readings. "We're detecting 7 survivors," reported Lieutenant Core, his 4 hands tapping across the console. "Life support is unstable. Radiation levels are rising." Threx turned to the team. "We go down, rescue who we can, and get out before the next flare from the star." "Understood?" The crew nodded. Evan stood quietly among them, his uniform dusted with flour. He wasn't part of the rescue team, but he had already prepared warm packs of food. Simple bread, soup, and something sweet for energy. Threx noticed. "You're coming too, human?" Evan looked up. "They'll need food and water the moment we reach them." "I can help." Threx studied him for a second, then nodded. "Very well. Stay close." The shuttle descended through red mist, shaking as it entered the colony's thin atmosphere. When the doors opened, a wave of dry heat hit them. The ground was cracked and lifeless. The colony domes ahead were half collapsed, lights flickering weakly. They moved fast, Evan carrying a small bag of supplies, the others scanning for life. Inside the main dome, they found the survivors. A group of 5 miners and 2 technicians, weak and dehydrated, huddled near a broken power core. One of them, an old alien with pale blue skin, looked up as Threx approached. "We didn't think anyone would come," he whispered. Threx offered him a hand. "We're not leaving you behind." While the crew began stabilizing the wounded, Evan knelt beside a young miner whose breathing was shallow. He opened one of his packs, offering a small piece of soft bread soaked in nutrient broth. The miner hesitated. "What is this?" "Something that helps," Evan said quietly. The miner took a bite, and for the first time in days his eyes brightened. The simple warmth of real food gave him strength to speak again. Evan moved from one survivor to another, giving them small pieces, whispering calm words. He didn't have a medical badge, but somehow what he did mattered just as much. The smell of bread filled the broken dome, a smell that reminded them all that they were alive. As the crew prepared to evacuate, the ground trembled violently. The red dwarf had begun another solar flare, sending waves of radiation toward the planet. The colony alarm screamed, "Commander!" Kor shouted. "The shuttle's shields won't last long." Threx barked orders. "Everyone move!"
"Get to the transport!"
But as they started running back, one of the corridors collapsed from debris. The path was blocked. Evan looked around quickly. "There's another exit near the kitchens," he said, pointing at a small map on the wall. "It connects to the lower airlock." Threx turned to him sharply. "How do you know that?" Evan gave a small shrug. "I read the layout earlier, habit." The captain gave him a nod. "Then lead the way." Evan took the front, guiding them through narrow tunnels filled with dust and flickering lights. Despite the chaos, he stayed calm, checking that no one was left behind. His quiet voice carried strangely steady through the static-filled air. When they finally reached the secondary airlock, the walls shook again. The blast from the flare was close. Evan pushed one of the injured survivors forward, helping them inside the shuttle. He was the last to board. As the doors sealed and the engines roared, the crew watched the colony vanish in a cloud of red dust. They had saved all 7 survivors, but it had been close. Back on the Vigilant Dawn, the survivors were treated and given rest. Threx called an emergency meeting to review damage reports, but the tension in the room was heavy. Everyone was shaken. Evan worked silently in the galley. He didn't attend the meeting. Instead, he prepared something special. When Threx returned hours later exhausted, he found the crew gathered in the galley again. The human had made sweet bread rolls with honey glaze and soft fruit filling. Nothing fancy, but the air was warm and smelled alive again. Threx frowned lightly. "You always seem to know when to cook." Evan smiled faintly. "Bad days need good smells." Threx chuckled, a sound rare for him. "You humans are strange." "Probably," Evan said, pouring tea into metal cups. "But strange helps." They ate quietly, the whole crew sitting together, survivors included. No one spoke for a while, but no one needed to. Even Saren, the officer who had once accused Evan of making them weak, silently took 2 rolls. Later that night, Threx found Evan still awake, cleaning the galley. The captain leaned against the doorway. "You saved lives today," he said. Evan looked up. "So did everyone." Threx tilted his head. "Yes, but you held them together. Your calm kept the panic from spreading." Evan dried his hands, thoughtful. "When people are scared, they forget what hope feels like. I just remind them." Threx watched him for a moment. "You remind me too, humans. You never stop surprising me." Evan smiled faintly. "That's what we're good at, sir." Days passed as they repaired the ship and headed home. The survivors joined in helping the crew. Every evening they gathered in the galley for food and stories. Evan taught some of them to knead dough, laughing softly as the alien hands tried to copy his movements. Lieutenant Kor accidentally splattered flour across the table. "I believe I have created a snowstorm," he declared proudly. Evan chuckled. "Close enough." Even Saren joined them once, pretending he was only observing. But when Evan handed him a steaming roll, he accepted without a word. The galley became the heart of the ship, a place where walls between species melted like sugar in tea. One evening, an unexpected signal came through. A distress beacon again. This time it was a damaged trade vessel nearby, broadcasting weakly. Threx frowned at the readings. "We can't ignore it," he said. "Prepare another rescue mission." The crew groaned softly, tired but ready. Evan tied his apron tighter, checking his supplies. He looked at the captain. "Permission to prepare food packs for the rescue team?" Threx nodded. "You never stop, do you?" Evan smiled. "Hungry people don't think straight. Let's keep everyone focused." Threx couldn't argue with that. The rescue took 2 days. They saved another crew, helped repair the vessel, and shared food with them. The other captain, a tall avian alien, was shocked by how united the Vigilant Dawn's team was. "You run a disciplined crew," he told Threx. Threx smiled faintly, glancing toward the human working quietly behind them. Discipline, yes. But the heart of this ship doesn't come from orders. The avian captain tilted his head. Then from where? Threx looked at Evan. From kindness. When the Vigilant Dawn finally completed its mission and set course for home, the entire crew decided to celebrate. Evan refused to call it a party, but somehow the galley turned into one anyway. There was laughter, music from 4 different worlds, and the smell of freshly baked pastries. At the center of it all, Evan stood behind the counter, smiling quietly as the crew enjoyed his work. Lieutenant Core raised a mug. To the quiet human who saved us more times than he admits. The room erupted in cheers. Even Threx lifted his cup. To the one who proved that courage doesn't always roar. Evan laughed softly, embarrassed. I just baked, sir. Threx smiled, showing sharp teeth. And that's what saved us. Later, when the lights dimmed and the celebration ended, Evan sat alone, watching the stars pass outside the viewport. His reflection looked small against the endless dark, but his eyes held warmth. He thought about the crew, how far they'd come from the cold. Tired beings they had been at the start. He thought about how simple things, bread, warmth, kindness, could reach deeper than fear or strength ever could. He whispered to himself, guess baking's not such a small thing after all. Behind him, Threx's voice rumbled softly. No, human. It's not small. It's what makes us remember we're alive. They stood together in silence, watching the stars drift by. The Vigilant Dawn sailed through quiet space, carrying the crew and 2 rescued groups back to the central colonies. The stars stretched endlessly, streaks of pale light against the black. But the calm was deceptive. An urgent signal arrived, crackling through the comm system. It wasn't routine distress this time. It was a warning. A rogue fleet of raiders attacking supply ships in the sector was approaching the colony they were bound for. Commander Threx's eyes narrowed. We have civilians aboard. We can't outrun them. Evan, standing in the galley stirring dough for a simple batch of bread, paused. He glanced toward the comms panel. Can we warn them early? Maybe get them prepared? Threx looked at him. Yes, but we'll need more than warnings. We might have to fight. Evan didn't flinch. He wiped his hands on a towel and followed to the command deck. Though small in size, he carried no weapon, only calm determination. By the time they reached the colony's orbit, the rogue fleet appeared. A swarm of jagged ships, black and sharp against the starlight. Sensors reported dozens of vessels moving fast with weapons charged. Panic rippled across the colony channels. Threx called the crew together. We can't stop them all. Our only chance is to organize defense with what we have and protect the civilians. Any ideas? There was silence. Even the seasoned officers hesitated. Evan stepped forward quietly. Sir, the crew trusts each other. Maybe we can use that. Simple things, food, communication, preparation. If everyone works together calmly, we can hold the line longer. Threx raised an eyebrow. Explain. Evan smiled faintly. During crises, fear spreads faster than lasers. I've seen this crew panic and then recover when they had something to focus on. If I prepare meals, quick, energizing, easy to distribute, and everyone works on their tasks and shifts, the raiders won't find disorganized prey. We can buy time. Threx studied him. You mean? Morale is strategy. Exactly, Evan said simply. A fed calm crew thinks faster. Threx nodded slowly. Then you lead the effort in the galley. Everyone else will follow. Evan worked quickly. He prepared stacks of nutrient bread, honey-filled pastries, and warm protein packs. Small handheld portions were packed for each officer and every rescue volunteer. The crew watched, confused at first, but then began helping. Flour flew. Dough was kneaded by 4-handed aliens and scaled ones alike, and laughter, quiet but determined, filled the galley. Even Saren contributed, carefully folding dough under Evan's watchful eye. By the time the raider fleet reached the colony's orbit, the Vigilant Dawn was ready. The crew, fueled by Evan's food and their growing confidence, manned stations with focus. Communication lines ran smoothly, repair teams moved efficiently, and medics were prepared. It wasn't technology alone that would save them, it was preparation, coordination, and courage. The first wave of raiders attacked. Beams of light tore across the void and alarms screamed through the Vigilant Dawn. But the crew held steady. They relayed damage reports, patched shields, and evacuated civilians quickly. Threx glanced at the galley door, where Evan stood calmly distributing energy packs to those who ran back exhausted from battle. Even in the chaos, the human's presence was grounding. Your calm keeps them steady, Threx admitted under his breath. Evan shrugged. I just keep the food coming. As the first skirmish ended, the crew realized something remarkable. They had slowed the raiders' progress. The enemy fleet expected easy targets, chaos, and fear. Instead, they found a coordinated, prepared, and surprisingly resilient force. Evan quietly moved from station to station, handing out warm food and words of encouragement. Keep going. You're doing great, he said simply. The effect was immediate. Exhausted crew members renewed their focus, repairing hull breaches, maintaining shields, and returning fire strategically. The second attack wave was stronger. Larger raider ships flanked the colony, trying to cut off the vigilant dawn. Threx's command staff worked furiously, but it was clear that brute force alone wouldn't be enough. Evan noticed small tensions building among the crew, miscommunication, fatigue, and fear. He acted instinctively. He gathered small teams in the galley, handed each a hot snack, and said, Eat. Even for a moment, focus on this. Then go back stronger. The crew followed, chewing quickly, smiling faintly, reassured by the human's calm. For a moment, the battle outside faded into background noise. For a moment, they remembered what they were protecting and why. Hours passed. By the third wave, the raider fleet was becoming frustrated. They expected fear, disarray, and surrender. Instead, they encountered a disciplined, united crew that moved faster than expected, repaired faster, and fought smarter. Threx glanced at Evan, who was quietly kneading more dough in the galley, ready to distribute food as needed. You're more than a cook, Threx said quietly. Evan looked up, flour dusting his uniform. I just make sure everyone can do their best. That's all. No, Threx said, voice low but sincere. You remind everyone what humans can do, quietly, without weapons, without orders. And that is strength. Evan didn't respond with words. He just nodded, focused on baking, letting the action speak. By the end of the cycle, the raider fleet had retreated. Their expectation of easy prey had been shattered. Sensors reported retreat vectors, and the colony was safe. Exhausted but unbroken, the vigilant Dawn crew began repairs and debriefs. The survivors they had rescued joined in immediately, helping feed others, distribute supplies, and repair damaged hulls. The colony's citizens saw that courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it baked quietly in a small galley, reaching the hearts of everyone. That night, the crew gathered once again in the galley. Candles, small, energy-efficient lights, flickered as the smell of freshly baked bread filled the room. No music was needed. Laughter and conversation bubbled naturally. Evan served the last batch of rolls. Eat, he said softly. Tomorrow is another day, but tonight, we rest. Threx watched the human from across the room. For months he had doubted the value of a civilian cook. He had thought humans were fragile, talkative, and ill-prepared for space. But Evan had proven something far more important. That calm, focus, and compassion were just as vital as any weapon or shield. The captain approached him. You have done more than feed stomachs, Evan. You've fed courage, hope, and unity. Evan smiled faintly, wiping his hands. I just baked, sir. No, Threx said, voice firm. You inspired. You reminded us that humans, even quiet ones, are capable of greatness. The next day, as the vigilant Dawn prepared to leave orbit for the journey home, the colonists waved from the repaired docks. Children ran to the edge, carrying small loaves of bread Evan had left for them, hoping to taste the warmth of the human who had saved them. Evan paused to watch them, smiling softly. One of the children waved and shouted, Thank you, Baker. He gave a small wave in return, quiet and simple, and returned to the galley. Threx followed, placing a clawed hand lightly on Evan's shoulder. We may not always understand your ways, he said, but we will never forget them. Evan looked up, calm. That's all I need, sir. Weeks later, back in the central colony hub, the story of the vigilant Dawn and its quiet human cook spread across star systems. Humans were admired not only for their bravery but for their ability to inspire others through kindness and competence. Other fleets started including civilian specialists, realizing that strength came in many forms. And for the crew of the vigilant Dawn, one thing remained clear. The human who didn't talk much but could bake had changed them all forever. In the galley, Evan stood quietly mixing a new batch of dough. He didn't need recognition, applause, or medals. His purpose was simple: to feed, to nurture, to give courage in the smallest, most human way he knew. And as the stars streaked past the viewport, he whispered softly to himself, "Sometimes all it takes to save the universe is bread." Commander Threck stood nearby watching. Sometimes human, sometimes yes. The vigilant dawn glided on through space, carrying a crew bonded not just by orders and duty but by shared meals, quiet courage, and the unspoken power of humanity. And in the heart of the ship, a small galley glowed warmly, a beacon of hope, kindness, and quiet heroism,